Did you know that one of the scariest movies ever made was filmed almost entirely in bright daylight? Most horror films hide their monsters in shadows. But The Innocents did something different. It showed its ghosts standing in sunlight, staring through windows, waiting in gardens, and somehow that made everything even more terrifying. This 1961 masterpiece still gives people chills more than 60 years later. It stars the legendary Deborah Kerr as a governess who believes evil spirits haunt two children. Or does she imagine it all? The film never tells us for sure. Behind the cameras, secrets waited. Strange choices were made. Real fears crept onto the screen. Let's dive in and discover 20 weird and amazing facts about The Innocents. Number 20. The famous writer who hid in the shadows. When you watch The Innocents, you see elegant dialogue, words that feel old but beautiful, sentences that sound like poetry. But here is a surprise. One of America's most famous writers helped create those words, and almost nobody knew about it for years. Truman Capote worked on the screenplay. Yes, the same Truman Capote who wrote Breakfast at Tiffany's and In Cold Blood. He was already becoming a literary star when the producers asked him to help. They wanted his gift for language. They wanted his understanding of dark human emotions. Capote did not receive top billing for his work. William Archibald, who had written a stage play based on the same story, got the main credit. Capote worked quietly, polishing scenes and adding layers of meaning. He made conversations feel heavier. He gave characters words that seemed innocent but hid dangerous thoughts. The producers worried about something else, too. Capote was known for wild parties and loud opinions. They feared he might overshadow the film with his personality. So they kept his involvement somewhat quiet during promotion. Years later, film historians discovered just how much Capote contributed. His fingerprints were everywhere, in the rhythm of the dialogue, in the way fear builds through what characters do not say, rather than what they do say. Capote himself rarely talked about The Innocents in interviews. He seemed to prefer his books getting attention. But people who studied the film closely noticed his style. The way Miss Giddens speaks to the children, the careful dance of words between adults. That was Capote magic. A famous author helped create a famous film. But for decades his shadow stayed hidden behind the curtain. The words reached millions of ears, but few knew whose mind had shaped them. Number 19. The little girl who became a horror legend. Pamela Franklin was only 11 years old when she played Flora in The Innocents. She had never acted in a movie before. Directors had seen hundreds of children for the role. They needed someone who could seem sweet and innocent one moment, then deeply unsettling the next. Pamela walked into her audition and changed everything. Director Jack Clayton watched her read lines. He saw something in her eyes, a knowing quality that felt older than her years. She could smile and make you uncomfortable at the same time. Getting the role was just the beginning. Pamela had to perform difficult scenes that would challenge adult actors. She had to pretend to be possessed by evil. She had to cry on command. She had to stare at things that were not there and make audiences believe ghosts stood before her. The crew quickly realized Pamela was special. She understood the story better than some adults on set. She asked smart questions about her character. Why does Flora do this? What is Flora feeling here? These were not typical questions from a child actor. After The Innocents, Pamela's career took off. She appeared in more horror films. She starred in The Legend of Hell House in 1973. She became known as someone who could bring genuine terror to the screen. But it all started with this one film, this one audition, this one director who saw something extraordinary in an 11-year-old girl from London. Pamela later said the experience shaped her entire life. She learned discipline. She learned how to find truth in strange stories. She learned that acting was not about pretending. It was about believing. A child walked onto a film set. A horror legend walked off. Sometimes careers are born in single moments of recognition. Number 18. The cameraman who painted with shadows. Freddie Francis was already respected when he joined The Innocents. But this film made him a legend. His camera work created images that burned into viewers' memories. Every frame looked like a painting from a nightmare museum. Francis made unusual choices. He used deep focus photography, which meant everything in the frame stayed sharp, foreground, middle ground, and background all at once. This sounds technical, but the effect was powerful. When a ghost appeared far away in a window, you saw it clearly. You could not escape it. Your eye had nowhere to hide. He also used darkness in ways other cameramen avoided. Sometimes the edges of the screen faded into pure black. Characters seemed surrounded by shadows that wanted to swallow them. Light came from candles and windows, never from obvious movie lights. The black and white photography was Francis's choice as much as anyone's. Color films were popular by 1961. Studios wanted bright colors to attract audiences, but Francis and Clayton agreed. This story needed the elegance of black and white. It needed the contrast between light and dark to feel absolute. Francis spent hours setting up single shots. He would move lights by inches. He would adjust curtains to let exactly the right amount of daylight through. The crew sometimes grew impatient, but Francis kept working until the image matched his vision. His efforts earned him the Academy Award for Best Cinematography that year. Critics called The Innocents one of the most beautiful horror films ever photographed. Even people who did not like scary movies admired how it looked. Number 17. The haunting song that nobody could forget. Before the movie even begins, you hear it, a child's voice singing words that make no sense at first. The melody is simple, almost like a lullaby. But something feels wrong. The tune seems to float from another world. The song is called O Willow Wally. It was written specifically for The Innocents by composer George Auric and lyricist Paul Dane. They created something that sounded ancient, like a folk song passed down through generations. But it was completely new. The lyrics speak of lost love and weeping. A willow tree cries, a heart breaks. For a children's song, the words carry heavy sorrow. When little Flora sings it in the film, the effect is disturbing. A sweet voice delivers a message of grief. Auric designed the melody to feel incomplete. It seems to search for resolution, but never quite finds it. This musical trick creates unease in listeners. Your brain expects the song to finish a certain way. When it does not, you feel unsettled. The production team recorded the song with a young singer whose voice had an ethereal quality. They added echo effects to make it sound like the voice came from far away, or from long ago. After the film's release, O Willow Wally stayed with audiences. People reported hearing it in their dreams. Some said they could not get the melody out of their heads for days. The song had worked its way into their minds like a gentle haunting. Musicians have covered the song many times since 1961. Horror films have referenced it. Television shows have borrowed its style. It became a template for creepy children's music in countless movies that followed. Number 16. The ghosts who appeared in daylight horror movies love darkness. Monsters hide in shadows. Creatures jump from black corners. Audiences expect scares to come when the lights go out. The Innocents broke this rule completely. Its ghosts appeared in broad daylight. They stood in sunny gardens. They watched from bright windows. They made no effort to hide in darkness. Director Jack Clayton understood something important about fear. Darkness makes you expect danger, but daylight is supposed to be safe. When something terrible appears in a safe place, the horror cuts deeper. Your mind has nowhere to retreat. The first major ghost appearance happens across a lake on a bright afternoon. Peter Quint stands on a tower, staring. The sun shines. Birds probably sing somewhere nearby. Everything looks peaceful, except for the figure watching. That contrast creates pure dread. Clayton talked about this choice in interviews. He said real horror comes from the unexpected. A ghost in a dark basement is almost cliché. A ghost standing in your garden while you drink tea. That feels personal. That feels like an invasion of your safe world. The daylight photography also meant audiences could see the ghosts clearly. No hiding behind bad lighting, no convenient shadows to cover cheap costumes. The ghosts had to look genuinely disturbing in full visibility. Freddie Francis lit these scenes with careful precision. He made the ghosts look slightly different from other characters. Their skin seemed paler, the light around them felt cooler, subtle differences that your eye noticed even if your mind did not. Number 15. The mansion that played a character. Bly House needed to be more than a setting. It needed to feel alive. It needed to seem like a character in the story, with moods and secrets and hidden dangers. The production team searched for the perfect location. They visited dozens of English country estates. None felt right. Some were too grand. Others were too modern. They needed a place that looked beautiful but held something sinister beneath its surface. They finally found Sheffield Park in East Sussex. The house and gardens had exactly the quality Clayton wanted. Elegant architecture surrounded by wild nature, formal rooms next to mysterious corners. The estate seemed caught between two worlds, civilization and wilderness, order and chaos. The gardens became especially important. Those scenes where Miss Giddens wanders among statues and overgrown paths were filmed in Sheffield Park's actual grounds. The weathered stone figures and tangled plants created natural atmosphere. The production team added very little. Inside the house, the crew transformed rooms to match their vision. They removed modern furniture. They brought in Victorian pieces. They hung specific curtains and placed particular paintings. Every detail helped tell the story. The long hallways presented both opportunity and challenge. Clayton loved filming Deborah Kerr walking those corridors, candle in hand, shadows dancing on walls. But the real hallways were not always positioned correctly for cameras. The crew sometimes built extensions or used mirrors to create the perfect angles. By the end of filming, everyone felt the location had given something to the movie that could not be manufactured. The house had a presence. It had history. It had secrets written into its stones. Number 14. The Boy Who Understood Too Much. Martin Stevens played Miles, the haunted young boy at the heart of the mystery. At just 12 years old, he delivered a performance that still disturbs viewers today. His Miles is polite, charming, intelligent, and deeply wrong somehow. Stevens had already appeared in another famous horror film. He played a creepy child in Village of the Damned just 1 year earlier. Directors knew he could project unnatural calm. He could smile in ways that felt calculated rather than joyful. For The Innocents, Stevens dove deep into understanding his character. He read the original story by Henry James. He discussed Miles's psychology with Clayton. He wanted to know what drove this strange boy. The result was fascinating ambiguity. When you watch Miles, you never know if he is a victim or a villain. Is he an innocent child controlled by evil forces? Or is he consciously manipulating everyone around him? Stevens kept both possibilities alive in every scene. His most challenging moment comes near the film's end. Miles must show fear, defiance, manipulation, and vulnerability all at once. The camera stays close on his face, while emotions shift like weather patterns. Adult actors struggle with such demands. Stevens handled it perfectly. Something about his eyes made audiences uncomfortable. They seemed to see too much. They seemed to hide too much. Clayton recognized this quality and used close-ups frequently. He knew those eyes told stories that words could not. Number 13. The Kiss That Shocked Audiences. Near the film's climax, something happens that audiences in 1961 found deeply troubling. Miss Giddens kisses Miles on the mouth. The moment is brief but intense. It crosses boundaries that most films of that era never approached. The scene sparked controversy immediately. Critics debated its meaning. Was Miss Giddens trying to save the boy's soul through an act of love? Was she expressing inappropriate feelings? Was she herself becoming corrupted by the evil in the house? Clayton never fully explained his intentions. He wanted audiences to feel uncomfortable. He wanted them to question Miss Giddens' sanity and motivations. The ambiguity was deliberate. The filmmakers knew they were taking a risk. British censors watched the scene carefully. American distributors worried about audience reactions. But everyone agreed the moment served the story. It showed how far Miss Giddens had fallen into obsession. Deborah Kerr later discussed the scene in interviews. She said she approached it as a desperate act by a woman losing her mind. Miss Giddens believes she is fighting demons. In that frantic moment, normal rules no longer exist for her. The kiss represents her complete break from reality. Modern viewers often find the scene even more disturbing than 1961 audiences did. Our awareness of certain issues has grown sharper, but that discomfort is exactly what Clayton wanted. He was making a horror film about things that should not happen. The kiss remains one of the most discussed moments in classic horror cinema. It appears in countless essays and video analyses. Film students debate it endlessly. One brief action, 60-plus years of arguments. Some moments in cinema become more than moments. They become permanent questions that never find answers. Number 12, the director who almost said, "No, Jack Clayton nearly did not make The Innocents." He had doubts about whether the material could work as a film. He worried that a psychological ghost story might bore audiences expecting obvious scares. Clayton was an unusual choice for horror. His previous film, Room at the Top, was a realistic drama about working-class ambition. It had no ghosts, no children, no candlelit hallways. Critics knew him as a serious director of adult stories. When producers approached him with the adaptation of Henry James's tale, Clayton hesitated. He read the novella multiple times. He saw its power, but questioned whether cinema could capture something so subtle. Ghosts that might not exist. Horror that lives in suggestion rather than display. His wife convinced him to try. She believed the story matched his interests in human psychology. She saw how he could bring visual poetry to the material. She pushed him to take the risk. Once committed, Clayton became obsessive. He spent months planning every detail. He worked on the script personally. He interviewed dozens of child actors. He visited locations across England. Nothing was left to chance. The production became one of the most carefully designed in British film history. Clayton created detailed storyboards. He wrote extensive notes about each scene's emotional meaning. He rehearsed with actors for weeks before cameras rolled. His dedication paid off spectacularly. The Innocents became his most celebrated work. Critics who doubted a serious director could make effective horror had to reconsider. Clayton proved that thoughtful filmmaking elevated the genre. He later said The Innocents was his favorite among his films. The project that almost did not happen became the project that defined his legacy. Hesitation nearly killed a masterpiece. Persistence brought it to life. Sometimes the best decisions come from pushing past doubt. Number 11, the Victorian details. Nobody noticed. The Innocents takes place in the 1860s, roughly a century before the film was made. Getting that era right required exhausting attention to detail. Every costume, every prop, every piece of furniture had to feel authentic. Costume designer Motley created Miss Giddens's dresses with historical accuracy. The fabrics, the cuts, the buttons, everything matched what a governess of that period would actually wear. These were not theatrical costumes designed to look pretty on camera. They were recreations of real clothing. The children's outfits presented special challenges. Victorian children from wealthy families dressed formally. Miles wore suits that would strangle most modern boys. Flora wore layers of petticoats and restrictive bodices. The young actors had to move naturally in clothing designed to limit movement. Props filled the house with period-appropriate items. Writing desks held correct pens and inkwells. Bedrooms featured appropriate furniture and decorations. Books on shelves were genuine Victorian volumes borrowed from collectors. The production even considered small details audiences would never consciously notice. Door handles were replaced with Victorian styles. Light switches were hidden or removed. Electrical outlets vanished behind furniture. Why bother with such invisible accuracy? Clayton believed that truth accumulated. Each correct detail added to an overall feeling of reality. Even if viewers could not identify what made the world feel genuine, they would sense it. He was right. Critics praised The Innocents for its atmosphere. They called it immersive. They said it transported them to another time. That transportation came from thousands of small decisions about buttons and inkwells and door handles. Modern films often create period settings through computer effects. The Innocents did it through physical reality. Every object was real, every fabric was touchable, every room was complete. Sometimes the tiniest choices create the biggest impressions. Details too small to see still shape what we feel. Number 10. The sound of silence. Most horror films assault viewers with noise. Sudden musical stings, loud crashes, screaming violins. The Innocents took a different approach. It used silence as a weapon. Long stretches of the film contain almost no music. Characters speak softly. Rooms feel hushed. The quiet becomes unbearable. Audiences find themselves leaning forward, straining to hear, waiting for something to break the tension. When sounds do occur, they cut like knives. A distant singing voice, a whisper in an empty room, a name called through darkness. These moments land hard precisely because silence surrounds them. Sound designer Daphne Oram created audio textures that felt almost subliminal. She added frequencies that audiences felt more than heard. Low tones that created physical unease, high pitches at the edge of perception. These sounds worked on viewers below consciousness. The nursery rhyme sequences use this technique powerfully. Flora's singing begins distant and unclear. It seems to come from nowhere and everywhere. The sound design makes the voice drift through the house like smoke. George Aurich's musical score supports the silence rather than filling it. His compositions are sparse and restrained. Long notes, simple melodies, plenty of space between sounds. The music breathes, allowing tension to build naturally. Clayton directed his actors to speak quietly in many scenes. Deborah Kerr often delivers lines barely above whispers. This forces audiences to pay close attention. Passive viewing becomes impossible. The cumulative effect is exhausting in the best way. Viewers feel drained after watching The Innocent. Their minds have been working constantly, processing the silence, anticipating the next sound, never allowed to relax. Loud horror fades quickly from memory. Quiet horror echoes forever in the mind's silent corners. Number 9. Deborah Kerr's Method of Madness. Deborah Kerr was already a major star when she took the role of Miss Giddens. She had appeared in The King and I and From Here to Eternity. She was nominated for Academy Awards multiple times. She could have chosen any project. She chose The Innocents because the role terrified her. Miss Giddens required something Kerr had never attempted. She had to show a woman slowly losing her grip on reality while believing she was completely sane. Kerr researched psychological conditions. She read about delusion and obsession. She studied how people rationalize irrational beliefs. She wanted to understand Miss Giddens from the inside out. During filming, Kerr stayed in character between takes. She walked the halls alone. She spoke to other actors as Miss Giddens would. This immersion exhausted her but produced extraordinary results. Her face became the film's greatest special effect. Watch how her expressions shift throughout the story. Early scenes show a confident, compassionate woman. Later scenes reveal cracks. Fear creeps into her eyes. Desperation tightens her jaw. By the end, she looks haunted whether ghosts appear or not. Kerr insisted on doing her own challenging scenes without assistance. When Miss Giddens runs through the house in terror, that is Kerr actually running. When she holds Miles during his final moments, her tears were real. She felt everything her character felt. After production ended, Kerr said she needed weeks to recover. Playing Miss Giddens had affected her more deeply than any previous role. She had visited dark places in her own mind to find the character. Critics recognized her achievement. Many called it the finest performance of her career. She proved that horror films could contain acting as powerful as any prestige drama. A star brought her light into darkness. The darkness transformed her. Both the character and the actress emerged changed. Number 8. The camera tricks nobody saw. Creating ghosts presented problems. The Innocents wanted its spirits to feel real, not like obvious special effects. Clayton and Francis developed techniques that remained invisible to audiences. For Peter Quint's appearances, they used carefully planned depth of field. The ghost always appeared far from Miss Giddens. He stood across lakes, in distant windows, at the ends of long hallways. This distance made him dreamlike while keeping him visible. The filmmakers never used obvious ghostly effects like transparency or glowing outlines. Peter Quint and Miss Jessel look solid. They look like real people. This refusal of traditional ghost imagery made them more disturbing. Lighting created subtle differentiation. When ghosts appeared, Freddie Francis adjusted the quality of light around them slightly. He used cooler tones and harder shadows. The change was so minimal that viewers could not identify it consciously. But their eyes sensed something wrong. Camera movements around ghostly appearances followed specific rules. The camera never moved quickly toward ghosts. It approached slowly or remained still. This dreamlike pace enhanced the supernatural feeling. For Miss Jessel's appearances among the reeds by the lake, the crew used natural elements as cover. Plants partially obscured her. Water reflected her image. She seemed part of the landscape rather than separate from it. The famous shot of Quint outside the window used practical technique. Actor Peter Wingard stood outside the actual window. Lighting matched inside and outside perfectly. The glass created just enough reflection and separation to make his presence unsettling. These invisible techniques influenced generations of horror filmmakers. Directors studied the innocence to learn how restraint creates fear. Less really could be more. The best tricks are tricks you never see. The best illusions are illusions you never question. The innocence made ghosts feel real by refusing to make them feel fake. Number 7. The story that inspired endless debate. The Innocence is based on The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, written in 1898. This short novel had already caused decades of argument before the film existed. James deliberately crafted an ambiguous tale. Are the ghosts in his story real? Or does the governess imagine them? Scholars have argued both sides for over a century. The text supports either reading. Clayton embraced this ambiguity completely. He refused to answer the question definitively. Different viewers watching the same scenes reached different conclusions. Some see genuine supernatural horror. Others see a psychological portrait of madness. The script maintains this balance carefully. Every piece of evidence for ghosts can be explained naturally. Every natural explanation leaves room for supernatural interpretation. The film walks a perfect tightrope. This ambiguity frustrated some audience members. They wanted clear answers. They wanted to know if the ghosts were real. Clayton told them to decide for themselves. Film scholars have written extensively about this uncertainty. Academic papers analyze specific shots for clues. Conferences feature debates about the true meaning. The arguments continue today. Clayton said he personally believed the ghosts were real within the story. But he deliberately made the film support the opposite view equally. He wanted viewers to argue. He wanted the film to live in conversations after the credits rolled. This approach influenced countless horror films that followed. The idea that audiences could construct their own interpretations became popular. Movies like The Shining and Mulholland Drive owe debts to the Innocence, a story with no clear answer, a film that refuses to explain itself. Sometimes the questions matter more than answers ever could. Chanchnam. Number 6. The Children Who Were Protected. Filming horror scenes with child actors required special care. Clayton and his team developed approaches to protect young Pamela Franklin and Martin Stevens from psychological harm. The children never watched complete takes of frightening scenes. They performed their parts without seeing the full context. Scary sequences were broken into small, manageable pieces. When Miss Giddens shows fear, the children often acted opposite a calm assistant rather than witnessing Deborah Kerr's distressing performances. This shielded them from the intensity. Clayton explained scenes to the young actors in gentle terms. Rather than describing terror and possession, he talked about playing games and pretending. The children understood they were making a scary movie without experiencing the scares themselves. On set, the atmosphere stayed light between takes. Crew members joked with the children. Games were organized during breaks. The dark material of the film never contaminated the daily experience of making it. Deborah Kerr took special interest in the children's well-being. She chatted with them about normal topics, school, hobbies, family. She wanted them to see her as a friendly adult, not the frightened governess. Neither child reported negative effects from the filming. Both spoke positively about the experience in later interviews. Martin Stevens called it professional and enjoyable. Pamela Franklin described a supportive environment. This careful approach was not universal in 1961 filmmaking. Other productions exposed child actors to troubling material. The Innocence team chose a more ethical path. Making horror does not require creating horror for your actors. Darkness on screen can come from light on set. Protection and professionalism produce better performances than trauma ever could. Number 5. The Cinemascope experiment. The Innocence was filmed in Cinemascope, an extremely wide format usually reserved for epic adventures and colorful musicals. Using it for a black and white psychological horror film seemed crazy to many in the industry. Cinemascope creates images much wider than they are tall. This format excels at showing vast landscapes, massive battles, and crowded dance numbers. It seems wrong for intimate stories set in dark hallways. Clayton and Francis turned this apparent weakness into strength. The wide frame allowed them to compose shots that included empty space alongside characters. Miss Giddens could stand on one side of the screen while darkness or threatening space occupied the other. This emptiness created dread. Viewers' eyes could not rest comfortably. The frame always contained regions where threats might appear. Even in safe scenes, the format reminded audiences that unseen dangers lurked nearby. Doorways and windows became especially powerful. The wide frame could show a character in the foreground, while a distant doorway revealed unexpected figures. Eyes naturally scan wide images, discovering horror in the corners. Critics initially doubted the choice. They expected Cinemascope to undermine the intimate terror James's story required. Instead, the format enhanced it. The technical gamble paid off brilliantly. Other horror filmmakers took note. The Innocence proved that any format could serve any genre with proper understanding. Technical limitations existed mainly in imagination, not in equipment. Today, widescreen horror is common. Films regularly use aspect ratios even wider than Cinemascope offered. But in 1961, The Innocence pioneered this approach. What seemed like the wrong tool became the perfect tool. Innovation comes from breaking rules everyone assumes must be followed. Number 4. The Actor. Nobody remembers. Michael Redgrave appears in The Innocence for only a few minutes. He plays the uncle, the man who hires Miss Giddens and then disappears from the story. His screen time barely exceeds 5 minutes total, yet those few minutes establish everything that follows. Redgrave's uncle is charming but clearly hiding something. He hires a governess with unusual conditions. She must handle everything alone and never contact him. His eyes suggest secrets he will never share. Casting Redgrave was deliberate strategy. He was a major British star. Audiences knew his face and trusted his presence. When this trusted figure behaves strangely, viewers immediately sense that something is wrong at Bly. Redgrave prepared extensively for his brief role. He met with Clayton multiple times. He developed a complete psychology for the character, even though most of it would never appear on screen. He believed thorough preparation made every moment count. His scenes were shot in just 2 days. Redgrave arrived, delivered perfection, and departed. The efficiency impressed the production team. Here was a star who needed no babysitting. Some critics argue the uncle is the true villain of the story. He abandons vulnerable children to an overwhelmed governess. He ignores warning signs. His negligence allows tragedy. Redgrave planted seeds for this reading in his performance. Modern viewers often forget Redgrave was even in the film. His appearance comes and goes so quickly. But his absence haunts the story as much as any ghost. Where is the responsible adult? Why did he run away? A few minutes of screen time, a lifetime of questions planted. Sometimes the smallest roles cast the longest shadows. Number 2. The film that critics rediscovered. When The Innocence premiered in 1961, it received positive reviews but modest box office returns. Audiences interested in horror often wanted more obvious scares. Audiences interested in sophisticated drama often dismissed the horror genre entirely. The film fell between categories. It was too subtle for monster movie fans. It was too scary for art house crowds. It found no comfortable home. Through the 1960s and 1970s, The Innocents played occasionally on television and in revival theaters. Small audiences discovered it and recognized its quality. Word spread slowly among film enthusiasts. By the 1980s, a critical reappraisal had begun. Scholars wrote academic papers about the film. Directors cited it as an influence. Best of lists started including it among the greatest horror films ever made. Martin Scorsese publicly praised The Innocents. He called it one of the scariest movies he had ever seen. His endorsement brought new attention from serious film fans. Home video releases introduced the film to younger generations. People who had never heard of The Innocents discovered it on VHS and later DVD. The audience grew steadily through word of mouth. Today, The Innocents appears on virtually every list of essential horror films. It has been restored and preserved. It plays at prestigious film festivals. Critics consider it a masterpiece of the genre. This transformation took decades. The film had to wait for the world to catch up with its sophistication. Patience rewarded both the movie and its gradually expanding audience. Some masterpieces announce themselves immediately. Others wait in shadows until the right eyes find them. Time reveals what first impressions miss. Number 1. The Woman Behind the Camera. The Innocents was produced by Jack Clayton, but a woman named Jeanie Sims worked as his assistant director and creative collaborator. Her contributions have only recently gained recognition. Sims helped coordinate the complex production schedule. She managed the child actors' welfare. She worked closely with Deborah Kerr on preparing emotional scenes. Her fingerprints touched every aspect of the film. In 1961, women rarely received prominent credits in filmmaking. Sims worked in a role that gave her responsibility without recognition. Her name appeared in small print, if it appeared at all. She had particular influence on scenes involving the children. Sims suggested ways to break difficult sequences into manageable pieces. She proposed games and activities that helped young actors relax. Her understanding of children improved the entire production. Clayton relied on Sims for honest opinions. When scenes were not working, she told him directly. When ideas needed refinement, she offered alternatives. Their creative partnership strengthened the film at every stage. After The Innocents, Sims continued working in British film and television. She assisted other directors and eventually produced her own projects. Her career spanned decades, always marked by professionalism and creative intelligence. Film historians are now documenting contributions from women like Sims. Records are being corrected. Names are being restored to their proper places. Innocence was not made by one man's vision alone. It was shaped by many hands, including hands that history overlooked. Recognition delayed is still recognition deserved. The light finally reaches those who worked in shadows all along. Bonus fact: the lost prologue. In early versions of the script, The Innocents began very differently. An extended prologue showed Miss Giddens's life before she came to Bly. We saw her strict religious upbringing. We saw her father's harsh discipline. We saw her loneliness and yearning for purpose. This prologue would have answered questions the final film leaves open. It would have shown viewers exactly why Miss Giddens was psychologically vulnerable. Her religious intensity and suppressed emotions would have been clearly established. Clayton filmed several prologue scenes. Deborah Kerr performed as young Miss Giddens in simple country settings. The footage showed a woman already struggling with inner conflicts. During editing, Clayton grew uncomfortable. The prologue explained too much. It turned mystery into psychology. It gave audiences information that felt better withheld. He made the difficult decision to cut everything. Hours of filmed material disappeared. The film would begin in the middle of the story, with Miss Giddens already arriving at Bly. This choice preserved ambiguity. Without the prologue, we never know what Miss Giddens brings to the situation. Is she healthy or already unstable? The audience must decide. The lost footage reportedly still exists somewhere in archives. Film preservationists have searched for it. Researchers dream of someday releasing a version with the prologue restored. But many fans argue the film is perfect without those scenes. What was removed made what remained stronger. The gap in our knowledge creates the space where fear lives. Clayton understood that sometimes the best scenes are scenes you never show. The scissors made the film sharper than the camera alone ever could. Absence creates presence. What we cannot see, we imagine. And imagination sees more than any camera ever could. The Innocence is more than a ghost story. It is a meditation on perception and belief. It asks whether we can ever trust what we see. It wonders whether innocence can survive contact with darkness. Behind the elegant images and haunting sounds, real people worked. They solved problems. They made difficult choices. They poured creativity into every frame. Their dedication produced something that still affects audiences more than 60 years later. Films like this remind us why cinema matters. Moving pictures can reach places that words alone cannot touch. They can show us fears we did not know we had. They can make us question the boundary between imagination and reality. Every person who made The Innocents, the famous and the forgotten, the credited and the uncredited, contributed to something lasting. Their work survived them. Their choices still echo. If you enjoyed these stories, subscribe for more. Every movie hides a truth, and we will keep uncovering them one story at a time.